Today we're going to be talking to David Shar, who is one of my alumni actually. He has an MPS in Industrial Organizational Psychology and is currently working toward his PhD in Industrial Organizational Psychology. He runs his own business, Illuminate PMC, which is a consulting business. And you'll hear from him in a few moments a little bit more about his journey into IO psychology, into both the MPS and his PhD, and then what he's doing right now with IO. So stay tuned.
So who even are you?
That's it. Hi.
Hi. How you doing?
So I'm David Shar.
Okay.
So, and you know me because I was in
Do
your
I?
program.
Oh my God, you were. How about that?
Your master's program. Amazing program. I have to say that. But my start was in management, and I started actually as a manager, franchisee of a small ice cream parlor in Baltimore City.
Okay.
All my crew members, or the vast majority of them, came from the inner city of Baltimore or from Dundalk, which is another, low-income area. And they came with a whole bucket full of issues from school and home and all those things, and came to work. And I was sort of a young entrepreneur making it up as I was going along. And one day I looked around and realized that I didn't have the turnover that the guy who owned the Subway across from me or the pizza place across from me had, that I didn't have the same levels of employee theft, that my employees loved being at work. We were doing really cool things, volunteering with all the different organizations downtown, and there was 100% involvement to the point where I had to pay time and a half to people to stay behind at the store instead of coming for free to volunteer with us. So there was definitely something there, and I started looking into what that was. And
You were like, why am I so awesome?
right? Well, how did I accidentally stumble into this, right? And I realized, like, these kids that were like 16-year-old kids from the inner city, I was giving them keys to the place and asking them about marketing initiatives. They had never received that sort of trust or empowerment before.
Sure.
And it was, I don't really give myself credit for it. I feel like I was just too dumb to know that I wasn't supposed to do that. But it turned out that I was onto something. And so I read Dan Pink's book, Drive. Great book, amazing book about how you motivate people through intrinsic motivation, and the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation and different things that drive different people. And I was really turned on to the book. I felt kind of, I felt on one side, I felt really that this was really cool because it was exactly what I'd been doing. And on the other end, I'm like, oh, I guess I'm not such a genius. Like, this has been figured out already. And that set me down a path where I started really investigating employee engagement as described by Gallup. And I started talking about it to people, and then being invited on stage to talk about it to a lot of people. And so that was my path down, the employee engagement, the work culture and leadership sort of path.
So how did you even learn about IO psychology? Like, what brought you to the specific field of IO psychology?
Right. So that was a turn in my path, because I was sort of teaching myself, and I found myself on stage talking about this one time at the ice cream parlor, and I started thinking, well, how does this translate to everybody else?
Yeah.
Just because it worked for me in that situation with these employees doesn't mean that it's going to work somewhere else. And I'm reading all this third-party research, and if you even want to call it that, in magazines like Entrepreneur Magazine and Inc. and things like that. And so I was on a stage talking to 200 high potential employees, like manager track employees for a government what would we call association or whatever it is. And I blew the doors off that place. Like, they loved me. They rated me the highest in this seminar series they'd ever had.
That's awesome. And
so I made a phone call to the guy who was the boss of the people that brought me in. And I said, hey, so everybody loved me, and they all said, bring me back to talk to their bosses. Who can you introduce me to?
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, I'd like to see you get a little bit more credentialed. he said, go online, take a quick course in organizational development or something, and then come back, and then I'll recommend you. So I went through all the stages of grief. I went home, I was angry, I was sad, and then I'm like, I'm gonna make this happen, but I'm not gonna take a shortcut because he's right. He's not right that I need just another, some letters after my name. I need the education, I need the theory. So I went, and that's how I discovered IO, and I chose IO because as opposed to OD seemed like it was, organizational development seemed so heavy on the soft skills, and I felt like I had the soft skills. So
you seem relatively delightful.
Thank you. So I wanted industrial organizational psychology because there's such an analytical side to it, which I didn't think I had. And if I was going to spend the time, money, blood, sweat, and tears invested in this, I wanted to get something out of it that I didn't have. I wanted to expand my toolkit.
Sure.
So not only did I find IO, I found your program, and everything on your program's website was about statistics, etc. And because your program scared me the most, that's why I selected it. Because I really was interested in challenging myself and growing. Now I was scared and continued to be scared throughout the first terms, but we did sit down and you told me you could teach stats to anybody. I didn't believe you at the time, but it was true. And that was pretty amazing. But that's how I ended up with in IO and specifically at the University of Maryland.
So, what is IO psychology?
It's a good question. I remember coming in for my interview with you for the program, and the night before, I'm reading up online, what's IO? And my wife walked into the room and sees me Googling this, and she said, how are you applying? You've already applied for a program. You don't even know what it does. I'm like, I kind of know what it does, but I don't know what the I is. I don't know what the O is. I don't know. And so to this day, I couldn't tell you exactly because it's such a broad field. So IO to me is it's analytics, it's diving deep into the numbers and getting to understand the people side. The way I use it in my practice is through culture and leadership and figuring out the motivation, the influence part. I do a lot of help with selection. I come across so many small business owners who they specifically use unstructured interviews to select their people, which basically they're going to end up with the most charismatic person who has the most similarities to them in the end, which presents a whole lot of problems.
Yep.
And I go in there and help them develop a structured interview that aligns back with the qualifications, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that job requires. Interestingly enough, when we hire people for jobs, we don't really get to think about it. Half the time, the employer doesn't even know what the job they're hiring for really requires.
Yes.
So you really have to start backwards. So IO, at the core, is a different way of thinking. It's about thinking analytically, thinking in terms of questioning why we're doing things all of the time. And one of the best takeaways I got from you is the idea that you need to be a translator, between scientist and practitioner, and walk that line. Because what IO is, when you are an IO in the field, what that means is that you are taking the science and you are taking it into the real world. And the biggest part of that journey is making it accessible to the people who need to be implementing this stuff. So that's really IO for me.
So you mentioned kind of how you use IO in your work. What is your work?
So I consult with small to medium-sized businesses primarily, businesses that don't have an HR department, or they have a couple people sitting in an HR office that are so focused on the day-to-day tasks of payroll and onboarding people that they don't really have the opportunity, or maybe even the background in thinking bigger, thinking strategy, asking the questions like, how are we doing? Like, are we getting the right people in here? What's our turnover looking like? And how do we incentivize our people to stay? and to perform better. So that's what I go in. I take a look at the leadership. I take a look at the culture. One of the things that I do when I go in, I always sort of take the presented problem with a grain of salt, because typically the client recognizes that there's a problem and will probably get it in the right ballpark. Sometimes the problem you need to flash a mirror onto it because it's actually not the employee's problem, but something in the system. And so that's what I do on the consulting side, and then I really enjoy getting on stage and making this stuff really accessible to crowds of people as well, and speak to associations and business groups and things like that. But now instead of being all rah motivation, I don't feel like I'm a snake oil salesman anymore. Now I feel like I have such a focus on the transfer of training that I want people to laugh and cry when I'm talking. But more importantly, I want them to go back to the office and actually implement the things that we talked about and know how to do that and have the office set up so that it's safe for them to do that.
And if I understand correctly, when you say you consult, this really is you, right? This is your own business?
Yeah.
Okay, what's your business called?
Illuminate Performance Management Consultants.
Very, very fancy.
Illuminate PMC. Illuminate PMC.
Illuminate PMC.
Yes.
So how long has Illuminate PMC been in business?
So it's been in business now for about 6 months under that name. I built it up as a different name, Shar Seminars, which was very narcissistic of me and didn't really give me a whole lot of room to expand.
Yeah.
So I chose Illuminate because of the Hawthorne studies.
Yeah.
And how the scientists went into these factories and realized for the first time that the individual employees just being observed started performing better, that just because you were paying attention to them, and then when they then started studying their, asking them for their input on how to better do these processes, they started getting better and better results. So that's Illuminated, sort of a callback to that.
Very cool. And I understand you have a master's degree right now, some kind of master's professional studies.
Yeah, something like that.
Some crazy person's program somewhere.
Yes.
Why did you decide to go for a master's degree first and not for a PhD? Like, what was that even a question that you had initially? Like, how did you approach that part of the process?
So a PhD to me meant that I was going to go and be a professional professor, that was going to live in academia. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
I was going to say, I try to be a highly unprofessional professor, okay? Don't come at me. Okay.
Right. So a master's, and specifically a master's in professional studies, with a focus on, how you transfer that to the actual workplace, on a focus on how can you implement these things in the quote-unquote real world, seemed a lot more appropriate to me and more accessible as well, because you can do it in under 2 years.
Okay. How many programs did you apply for?
1. I knew what I wanted. For undergrad, I did the same thing, 1 program.
Okay, so that goes against all of the advice that I give everybody, but okay.
Yeah.
And you did mention earlier that it was a program that scared you the most.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that compliment. How did you find it?
So I think a lot of Googling.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Google for everything.
Yeah,
Google for
exactly. Exactly. Because I didn't even realize at the time how brand new the program was. I came in as the second cohort.
That's right.
But there aren't so many IO programs in Maryland.
Sure.
So once I did that first Google search, I was able to really look at all of the different options. I might have also gone on PsyOp's website and looked around as well.
Cool. So you initially decided, this is the program for me, it's a master's program, it's highly applied, this is what I'm looking for, I don't want to be a professional or unprofessional professor.
Right.
But you're in a PhD program right now, so you kind of screwed that up. What happened?
Okay, so I run.
I know.
And I ran a half marathon before that was attached to a marathon. And the entire time I'm looking at the marathoners and the medal they're getting, and I'm thinking, well, that's not cool. This seems like the consolation prize. But so maybe subconsciously there was a little bit of that. Like, if I went this far, why not take it all the way?
Right.
But in reality, I really wanted to explore further. undergrad, I enjoyed college. Grad school, I enjoyed the learning. And my greatest fear going through your program and even in my doctorate program is that I'm going to forget all this stuff. That's the nightmares that I have. It's
Google.
forgetting. Right?
Okay, Google and textbooks, okay?
Right. So I love actively learning. And in my experience, and a lot of people say this, the more you know you don't know.
Yes.
And so it became this journey for knowledge. I also found that going to school and working as a consultant together, they fed into each other so well.
Yeah.
Because I could be dealing with something with a client and then just open up a journal and it's right there. The answer is right there. Or I could be reading a textbook and come up with a brand new idea for a client. And I just love the journey. Also, I think putting doctor before my name is kind of cool. If I could do that before my parents drop dead, that would be a bonus. So being a nice Jewish boy, that always helps. So I think there's multiple reasons. The one reason that I hope is not true, but I fear sometimes is that when working on my studies, I feel productive. And I feel like I'm moving forward. So it's almost a security blanket.
Sure.
But it pulls you away from building the business because you're building it by learning more and by getting A's and by but I'm so conscious of that I think that if that is a subconscious sort of motivator of mine, I sort of override it, making sure that I put in equal time.
Excellent. And how did you decide which PhD program to go to?
So I needed something that was balanced. I needed something that was not a traditional PhD. I'm not a traditional student, as you can see from my hairline. So I needed something where I couldn't afford to push pause. I've got 4.5 kids at home, and there's the fetus in there. But
Your wife is pregnant?
You didn't know this?
Oh my God.
Yes.
Congratulations.
You're welcome.
Oh my God.
Thank you. It was, I didn't know either until like last week. No,
oh my God,
she's like 8 months pregnant or something. But I don't get a say in these things. Happy wife, happy life.
Okay.
We can discuss further off camera.
I was going to say off camera. All right. Keep going.
But the bottom line is, home is expensive, so I can't push pause on my career. I'm not getting any younger, and
most of us aren't. I think that's usually like we can't really Benjamin Button our way.
Exactly,
Lives, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm continuing to journey along and build my business, and I needed a program that would allow me to do that. So my doctorate program is one where you balance the work life and the schooling as well.
Okay. How long will it take you to do?
3 years minimum. It's all up to me with my dissertation, as we've talked about a lot. The more I do now, the quicker I'll get out. Yeah. So 3 years sounds really nice to me.
So right now, one of the things that we're doing on the Soapbox is we're trying to help people understand graduate school in IO psychology. Like, how do you prepare yourself for graduate school? How do you know whether to go to a master's or a PhD? How do you take those steps and how do you get yourself ready for it? How do you apply things like that? So really my last question is all around, any specific advice that you would have. You got some people out there, like my 2 subscribers are very interested and very curious
You got one.
about how to get themselves ready to apply for and then how to apply for these kinds of programs. So what advice do you have for people who are looking into graduate school in IO psychology and how to get themselves into graduate school in IO psychology?
I think you need to know what you're looking for. So you really need to know what interests you, especially when you're going into such a broad thing like IO. Because when you're in a program, you want the program to sort of complement what you're looking for. And then when you're in there, you want to be able to, make it your own. And make your own path within that. So if you choose a program that's super research focused and you really want to go out into the field and be a consultant, maybe that's not the right path for you. if you're interested in, I chose this program because of the stats, because of all the things that I didn't have. So I don't think it has to. I don't think it has to present all of your strengths, but it needs to present all of your interests. I think you need to work backwards, like everything in life. You gotta start with the end in mind and think, what do I want out of this experience, and then go get it. Pick the right program to get it, and then do that in the program. Make sure that you are getting what you want out of it.
And for those of you, I'm going to go ahead and look over here. Hey, what's up? For those of you out there on the other side of this camera, what David has not mentioned is that he did a bunch of things that I really like to see prospective students do. As a program director, he contacted me in advance. We had a conversation. I think you came to my office, right?
Yeah.
And we had a conversation well in advance of him applying so that he could get a better understanding of what the program was like and what he might do to prepare himself for it and to position for it. And so that kind of helped him because he wasn't just doing an application in the dark. He was putting it together, knowing what he wanted, knowing what the program was about, knowing what we look for. And he was generally, very upbeat, very motivated. He was clear on what he wanted. He was clear with what he wanted to do from here, which is not to say that it's always exactly what you end up doing, right? But the narrative was clear. The interest was clear. And David, I remembered very well, even before I read his application. I said, I know exactly who this is because of the work that he'd done leading up to that point in time. You probably didn't know that part. I'm comfortable with that.
Right.
So
thank you. But it is about drawing that line backwards. So I'm not saying I'm never lazy, but I don't think that's the reason why I only applied to one program. I applied to the one program because I decided this program was right for me.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Once I knew that this was right, if you didn't accept me the first time, I would have come back the second time. I knew that was the right match, and I know that you as a program director are looking for people who are the right match. So really, it's only a matter of me communicating that to you so
Correct.
You can see what I see.
And that's a key part of the process, that communication of how you are a match, and you did an excellent job with that.
Right, and understanding yourself to begin
Yes.
with, and understanding your story. A lot of people tell me, your life makes sense, and I don't know that my life path makes any more or less sense than somebody else. I'm just able to draw the thread backward to make it make sense.
Yes, and you're trying to find the string
Right.
that kind of connects everything. Any last pieces of advice?
Go Terps. Yeah, I think my last piece of advice is, when you are in a program, put everything you have into it. Don't go into it for the grades. You have to have a mastery approach, and screw the grades. The grades will come.
I like how you slipped that right in there. The mastery approach, a little bit of psych.
Yeah, there you
I
go.
like it. Very nicely done. Nicely done.
But really, the grades will come if you really care about the reading. But I know that I pushed against deadlines because I didn't want to put the readings down. I wasn't going to skim them. Like, I wanted this stuff, and I wanted to take notes on it, and it worked to my advantage. And then in the program, I knew that I was building my consulting thing, and I knew that was all of it for me. So you would assign papers, and I'd say, I'm going to make this into a consulting project, and it would make it twice the amount of work for me.
Yes,
but
it did.
But it solidified the information for me, in ways that I know other people weren't having the same takeaways. So you've got to make it your own and get the most you can out of it. For me, mommy and daddy weren't paying this time around, so it mattered. It was my investment.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me today a little bit about your educational journey and about what you do now. And now I'm actually going to, over here we have Mario Lopez. This is one of our incoming students. He's going to be in the cohort of 2019 to 2020. Mario just started the MPS program, and he is possibly thinking about a PhD program in the future. So Mario, I wanted to give you a chance to come on up here, meet David, one of our alumni, and ask any questions that you have while I eat my cookie over here.
Yeah, Mario, how's it going?
Fantastic.
Right on camera too.
Right? I know. So I wanted to know, how did you prepare in your master's degree for your doctoral degree, and how did you know that you wanted your doctoral degree from the beginning of your master's degree, if it was something that you knew from the beginning of your master's degree?
Yeah, I wasn't 100% sure in the very beginning. as we got closer, I started playing with the ideas. And then I started talking to Juliet about it. I started talking to Ken about it, and started saying, "What do you guys think about? Am I completely stupid for thinking about this?" And so once it started getting closer, I'm not sure that I did anything super specific to prepare. So my doctoral program was not, or is not. They didn't look for tons of research experience and things like that. They want people who are balancing work and school. So I think it's a little bit different. If you want to go to a research program, you want to make sure that you're getting in on some of this stuff, like getting some papers out or
Definitely.
getting in the laboratory. For me, I with this program, I didn't need that. But yeah, I think preparing was getting ready for it beforehand and getting the application in and starting to talk to people, and
Definitely.
the same way you got into the master's program.
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to know, basically, like, how did you go about doing your research in order to find this program, and what were some of the criteria that you were looking for in order to see if this program was the right fit for you?
The doctorate program.
Yeah, the doctoral program.
Yeah, so I talked to Ken and Juliet. Ken actually came back and he talked to his people and said, all right, if you're gonna do, because now one of the things with an online or blended PhD program,
And that's the program that you're in now.
Exactly,
Okay.
is that within the research community, they don't get the same respect as a traditional classroom, right?
Definitely, yeah.
So for me, that was sort of a hang up that I had, and I needed to work out whether that was my ego or whether there was actually any reason that I should have a hang up about that.
Yeah.
So the question was, why is it not getting the same respect, and also how will that affect me holding this degree?
Exactly.
Is this going to be like a degree from like one of those for-profit universities that people just sort of look at and or is it a good degree but it doesn't do the same things that a traditional program does, or is PSYOP a little bit behind on the 8 ball in terms of what they accept or recommend? So this program came back. There's a couple of them out there, and the program that I'm in right now came back as, if you're going to do an online blended sort of thing, do this one. This one, they have you come out. It's not exclusively online, and so there's more interaction. I think one of the upsides to a program like our master's program, where it's fully blended, you're there every week, is the network. I mean, there is nothing like the network. I still get on calls with friends from the program. It sets up so many great opportunities for passing business to each other, and also just sort of sharing articles with each other. I came across a great article just the other day that I sent an email out to a couple people, to share it with them because I know it would be valuable. So
Why didn't you share it with me?
I can share it with you too. I can share it with you too. So the programs that are more virtual, you don't really have that opportunity to build relationships in the same way, or it takes a little bit longer to build those relationships. They still happen over time because you do have, week-long things that you're together for and things like that. But so there were a couple different concerns that I played out in my mind, and talked out. But at the end, it's all about finding the right balance.
Definitely. And so, how long does the online program take versus the in-person doctoral degree program, and how was that time difference, and also that kind of like that work-life education balance a factor in your decision there?
Right. So, like I said to Juliet earlier, I run. And so
I run as well.
Oh, there you go. So you understand. As long as there's a finish line, you can do things that you never thought you could do.
Exactly.
Right. So with the program that I'm in now, it's 3 years, but 3-year minimum. So because there's classes, and then there's the comp exam, and then there's the dissertation, and that dissertation you gotta do it right. Otherwise, you're there forever and ever and ever, and you don't have somebody standing on top of you, you know, checking in with you every day to see if it's done. Right. So 3 years can, you know, they've told me a bunch of times, like if it turns into 5, don't. I'm like, you're saying me don't worry about that. That's because you're collecting my tuition. I'm worried about it. You know, so I for me the 3 years was a good selling point. You know, 3 years plus, you know, that's coming in with the masters. But you know, 3 years is good. If it goes a day over 3 years, then I'll start hearing about it from my wife for sure. So that definitely helps with knowing there's that end of the tunnel, and you know, and being able to set everything up so that I know, all right, that's when I really break out into a sprint at the end of those 3 years, and where do I want to be at the end of those 3 years?
Definitely.
You know, career-wise.
So how does your current employment situation respond to you being in your degree program?
Right. So now I'm self-employed.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. So I worked for a company for throughout the master's program. When I started the master's, I went to the company and had a conversation, and we were able to decrease my hours from what the traditional manager role, you know, worked in the company, and they were also able to adjust what those hours were, so I could really craft out, you know, time for the program.
Exactly.
And that was amazing. And that's really, you know, relationships and you showing your worth to the company before you have to go in and ask for a huge favor like that. You know, they really need to know that if it's between this and losing the guy, like, we'd rather work with them. So I had a great manager, a great regional that sort of worked with me and allowed that flexibility. But once I finished the master's program, then I went full-time, self-employed. So I imagined otherwise I would work out the doctorate the same way. But now that I'm self-employed, I'm the boss, which makes it a lot harder.
Yeah.
Because it requires so much discipline in terms of knowing when to split time for school and when to split time for work.
Exactly.
And when to split time for family, etc. And family, etc. are two different categories, in case my wife is watching. So family is its own category.
Exactly.
So, but that's what it requires: being able to split the time and really not cut corners on any of those things.
Definitely. So, like, my last question for you is did your acceptance and or commitment to becoming a part of that doctoral program influence your decision to become self-employed or work for yourself full time?
So actually, when I started at my previous employer, I put a 5-year timer on my computer. I'm very purposeful in okay, what's my next step? Put a 5-year timer, and that went off right at the end of our program.
Wow.
So I was going one way or another. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So it's just that self-confidence in one way or another, I'm going to make it work.
Yeah, and you work backwards and make it work.
Exactly. That's awesome. So as long as there's that finish line, you can work your way back and figure out how to get there.
So it all comes down to that, and then the discipline that it takes, as you know, as a runner.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Cool.
I appreciate your advice.
Yeah,
Thank you, David Shar. Come
Thank
here.
you.
Oh, I'm so glad that you could come in.